Hello, 8th grade students. We are going to work on our Andrea Garvey picture today. So let's start off with what we need as our essentials. In a minute, you're going to have an opportunity to get up and get yourself set up for the first step of this project. The first thing that you need to have is your board, and the most important thing is you need to have your name and period up here on the tape, and then your period right after that. So the first thing we are going to do to actually work on this project by Andrea Garvey is consider that we are layering and layering all different kinds of art supplies. The first thing we're going to be using in this project are colored pencils. And what you want to do is make a selection of colored pencils in a color family of your choice. And I've chosen some cool colors, some greens and blues, and I'm just going to make random designs with this. It's not about scribbling, it's more about making a pattern or a design with your pencils. So after you have a chance to select your pencils, we are going to start with the design. So take a minute and think about what colors you think would look good together and pick out about 5 pencils. Now that you've had a chance to pick out your pencils, I want you to just set them down. Don't do anything with them yet. I'm going to give you a demonstration of what you could do with your pencils and to create a design or pattern on your work. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but you can't just scribble something. You do have to try to make some sort of a pattern or design on your paper. So I am going to use a traditional system, which is to start in the middle and work out and just keep drawing designs and designs until I get to the edges of my paper. This is going to take me a little while, but I'm going to speed up the video so you can watch it in fast motion. And when this step is done, we're going to pause so you have a good chunk of time, maybe like 15 minutes, 20 minutes to work on this type of pattern. So here we go. Now that I have plenty of designs on my work, I am going to take the next step and watercolor over my designs. So what you're going to need for this is to set up yourself for watercolors, but I don't want you to do it yet. I want you to watch the demonstration and then we'll go from there. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to put away my colored pencils. I'm going to turn my work this way so you can see how I set myself up for the watercolor process. In this project, you're going to need a cup of water and you're going to need your watercolors, of course, but I want to show you the proper way to use watercolors. Most people don't know that this tray is actually used as the place where you make the paint. This is the concentrated paint, but you don't paint directly from here onto here unless you're going for something really dark. Watercolors are supposed to be very light. Here's how you make watercolors. First, I need to make a selection of what colors I want to use. I'm going to be using some purple, so I'm going to activate my paint by adding some water to my purple and my blue. Those are the only 2 colors I want to use in my background right now. Now I'm going to add some water right here to the tray. I'm going to add some in 2 different areas while my paints are getting wet and activating. And now that I have some water here and here, I'll take some of my blue, take that paint, go over here, and now I've made the paint. That's the paint I'm going to use for the project. Then I take some purple, go over here, and that's the paint I'm going to use for that. So there's 2 ways you could do this, and the recommended way is to use a process called wet on wet. Wet on wet means you're going to actually make your paper wet and add wet paint to your paper. That way you can control the paints a lot better. Watercolor paints are notoriously known as being the most difficult kind of paint to use. So it takes a little bit of patience and it's tricky, but this is how you're going to do it. Take some clean water, because dirty water makes a dirty painting. And you're just going to add some clean water to one area of your work. And you can see there where it's real shiny, there's my water. Then I'm going to take some paint and I just add a little bit of the paint in there. You can see I'm dabbing it around, very light. I don't want to cover up my colored pencil. And this is supposed to be very light. It'll still dry a little bit darker than it looks. While that's wet, I'm going to add some more water to the next section. You can see I'm just going to work from one side of my paper to the other. And I take some of the blue, and you can see it spreading around. That is called bleeding, when it spreads from area to area. I want it to mix with the purple on the edge right here. I'm going to pull some of that blue into new areas, and that's working as the wet. Add a little more water. You don't want it to dry and leave a weird kind of line on your paper. So I'm going to quickly, again, go with my water, add some more paint, make sure it's blending lightly. And you might think this is not the way that you're used to using watercolors. That's okay. This is how we're using it for this project. You don't always use watercolors the same way for every project. Once I've finished putting in my colors, if I feel like I need to go back and add a little bit more and spruce it up a bit so that it has a little bit more density of color to it, then that's fine. You go ahead back in there and do that. But you're not trying to make it super dark. You're not trying to cover up your work. That's not the point of this. If for any reason you got too much paint somewhere, you go back with your brush and clean water, and you can actually re-wet it and then just move the paint away like that. Make sure you go all the way to your edges. Don't want to leave any weird white spots. After you have this, if you want to play around with the paint a little bit, take the tiniest touch of paint to the tip of your brush, and where you see it really wet, you can do a little dot. And if you feel like that's too dark, add a little water, and it'll dissolve it. If you really get into a crisis, you can get a wet paper towel, or a dry paper towel, excuse me, and you can dry that off of your paper. And just blot it. Don't rub it so hard that it rubs all the paint off. So we're going to pause and we're going to do some painting for a while here, and then afterwards I'm going to show you how we are going to clean this up. Let's take about 15 minutes to do some painting. You should work slowly and carefully and just have fun playing with the paints. But the point is not to cover up everything you just spent all your time drawing. The point is just to try to make different combinations of color and see what can happen when your colors do run together. You can get some really nice effects like that. So cleaning up your work is really important with watercolors. What you need to do is you need to actually go in here and take a dry paper towel, not a wet paper towel, and clean out the lids of your paints. Just like this. Get it completely clean. The other classes are using these watercolors and they have cleaned them out for you, so you need to clean them out for them as well. So let's pause here, get a paper towel, and clean out these paints now. And then I'm going to show you how we stack them to dry them. We're not done with this yet. So keep this out. Don't put this away yet. All right, so hopefully you've had a chance to clean out your tray and everything is good. I'm going to move this for a minute to show you how we actually stack up watercolor trays in the back of the room. So this is important. When you're finished with watercolors, you never ever close the lid. That will trap all the moisture inside and it makes your watercolors mold. They could actually mold. So what we do is we take the colored side and set it in the lid of the last one on the table like this, and you just stack them along the table, continuing until you get to the very end. So this is how you should take your watercolors to the back table and set them up to dry. Remember, please don't close them and put them back in the box. That could leave us with some real problems later. So let's pause here and put our watercolors back and then return to our seats. We are going to continue working on this. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to put away your water, put away your watercolors, everything is put away. And we are going to work on the next step of this project, which is using oil pastels. Now, oil pastels are what artists used to use instead of paints because they were a lot cheaper than paints. What I'd like you to do is be very careful with the boxes, please. These are the only ones we have, and they're really nice quality, actually. So you're going to open this up and you're going to share this with the people at your table because, like I said, we don't have many. The ones we have, they're really nice. So let's take care of them. You can work on your paper while it's wet with the oil pastels, and that's why we're doing these things in this order. So looking at your design again and seeing what you have here, you can start thinking about how you could incorporate oil pastel into your picture. You do not have to do something continuing with this. You could do something completely unrelated and different. If you look at Andrea Garvey's work, as I instructed you to do so on the slideshow of her work and her website, you will see that there's many different patterns that she uses. So what we're going to do is look at our work and decide what and how we'd like to incorporate some oil pastels. I created these swirls here, so I'm going to actually try to see if I can continue with this. Let's see. Now, I'm not crazy about how that turned out, and that's okay because later I'm going to have the chance to use some acrylic paints. And I might be able to go over some of this that I don't like. So let's take some time right now and use the oil pastels to make some designs and patterns on your work and see how that plays out. Let's take about 10 minutes to do so. Why don't we pause here and then continue working. So now that I've had a chance to work with the oil pastels on here, I'm going to call it done for the day, because the next step would be to get out the acrylic paints and paint pens and start doing some things on top of this. So if you don't like something on your picture, remember that's the beauty of this project. You can paint over it later and completely cover it up, but save that for the next step. If you don't leave any white paper showing, it's going to be really hard to attach paints and paint pens to this later. So let's clean up, please. Put all your oil pastels back in the box. Check the floor. Please check the floor to make sure none of these are on the floor. Not only do they make a giant mess, but we don't want to lose these either. They're very high quality. You guys have some really nice ones here at the school to use. And let's put these on the drying rack. The way you use the drying rack is you have to pull up, out, and then down for the drying rack. So it's a little bit challenging, but I know you guys can handle it. I hope you had a good day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.